Gus Tillman had seen plenty of wreckage in his time, but nothing like this. The derelict Zelify shuttle lay half buried in Omicron 7's rust-colored sand, its sleek silver hull warped from impact. It must have come down weeks ago, long enough for the heat storms to scour its exterior, but not enough for the scavengers to pick it clean. Gus adjusted his rebreather, gripping his dented plasma cutter. This kind of find could mean good scrap, maybe even something worth smuggling off-world. Then he heard it, a soft rustling, barely audible over the wind. Not metal shifting. Something alive. Gus tensed, hand instinctively hovering over the sidearm at his hip. He moved toward the sound, stepping over twisted beams and shattered glass. Something was wedged in the cockpit, small, trembling. A girl. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11, though with aliens, it was hard to tell. Her thin, grayish-blue skin stretched taut over her frame, her sunken golden eyes wide with something between terror and resignation. A mess of dark, membranous tendrils clung to her scalp like unkempt hair, and her tattered, once elegant clothing suggested she hadn't always been in this state. The kid was starving. Gus sighed. He knew better than to get involved. The Zelify were isolationists to the extreme, their laws making it clear that contaminating their kind with outside interference was punishable by death. If she was here, alone, it meant one of two things. Her people had abandoned her, or someone had brought her here to die. Not my problem, Gus told himself. He turned to leave. Then weak fingers grasped his coat. He looked down. The girl's lips moved, a barely there whisper escaping her throat. The words were garbled, half in her own language, half in rough, slurred English. Don't leave. Gus cursed under his breath. Great. Just great, he muttered, setting the kid down on the battered cot inside his scrapyard workshop. She was barely conscious by the time they reached his place, slumped against him in the passenger seat of his sand cruiser. Now, as she shivered under the dim orange glow of a jury-rig heating coil, he wondered what the hell he was supposed to do with her. He'd managed to get some water into her, but food was trickier. Humans could eat damn near anything, but Zelify? Their biochemistry was a nightmare. One wrong protein, and her insides could shut down. Gus exhaled, tapping his comm. Felix, you there? A burst of static, then a groggy voice. Gus? You know it's late, right? I got a situation. A situation? That's not like you. A pause. Wait. Does it involve breaking planetary law? Because I charge extra for that. Gus glanced at the girl. It might. Another pause. Then a resigned sigh. I'll be there in 10. Felix Rao arrived exactly 13 minutes later, looking more amused and concerned. The lanky engineer-turned-biologist swept into Gus's shop, pushing his goggles up onto his messy shock of black hair. All right, where's the emergency? Gus jerked a thumb toward the cot. Felix's grin faded. Oh. He moved quickly, scanning the girl with a handheld bioreader. She's malnourished, severely dehydrated, and running a dangerously low body temp. He glanced at Gus. How long she been out there? Dunno. Long enough. Felix frowned, adjusting the scanner. She shouldn't be alive. Zelify bodies aren't built for starvation, like humans. Something's keeping her going. As if on cue, the girl stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and her gaze settled on Felix. She inhaled sharply, pressing herself against the wall. Felix raised both hands. Hey, it's all right. We're not going to hurt you. Her golden eyes flicked between the two men, assessing. Then, voice hoarse but determined, she said, You are human. Felix blinked. Didn't expect her to know that word. Gus crossed his arms. She asked me not to leave her back there. Felix turned back to the girl. What's your name? She hesitated, then rasped, Kareni. Well, Kareni, you're safe now. He reached into his satchel, pulling out a nutrient capsule. This should help, but it might taste awful. She eyed the pill warily before snatching it from his palm and swallowing it dry. Felix turned to Gus. We can't keep her here. Didn't plan to. But you also didn't leave her to die. Felix smirked. You've gone soft. Gus grunted. We need to figure out where she came from. Kareni stirred. They left me. Gus met her gaze. Who? She hesitated. My people... Felix frowned. That's not normal. The Zelathai don't just abandon their own. Either she did something or... They feared me, Karenni whispered. Silence filled the room. Gus leaned against his workbench. Kid, why would your own people be afraid of you? She looked down, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. I see things. I know when something is wrong. Machines, people, before they break. Felix's eyes widened. You mean like an advanced intuition? Karenni nodded. Gus exchanged a glance with Felix. This wasn't just a lost kid. This was something bigger. Before they could press further, Gus's security system beeped. Someone was approaching. Felix checked the scanner. Bad news. That's planetary enforcement. Karenni tensed, instinctively shrinking into herself. Gus's grip tightened on his plasma cutter. Damn it! Felix exhaled. You know they'll take her if they find her. Gus knew, and if the authorities took her, she wouldn't just disappear into some bureaucratic mess. No, if what she said was true, if the Zelathai had deliberately cast her out, then whoever found her would want to know why. And that meant someone would want to dissect her to find out. Gus turned to Karenni. Kid, you up for a little trouble? She swallowed hard but nodded. Felix sighed. Guess we're doing this. Gus grabbed a battered old duffel, stuffing it with supplies. Tez owes me a favor. We need to get off-world. Fast. As the first knock echoed through the workshop, Gus took one last look at the girl he never should have picked up. Then he opened the back exit. Time to go. The stolen cargo skiff shuddered as it broke Omicron 7's atmosphere, rattling like a tin can in a storm. Gus gritted his teeth, gripping the controls while Tez Alvarez whooped from the co-pilot seat. Oh, man. Tez laughed, flicking switches like a kid in an arcade. You really outdid yourself this time, Gus. Smuggling a Zelathai? That's not just illegal. It's they'll turn us into space dust illegal. Less talk, more flying, Gus growled. From the back of the cramped cabin, Felix secured Karenni into a makeshift seat. She sat stiffly, her golden eyes darting between the glowing displays, hands gripping the harness like the universe might shake her loose at any moment. Mira Noakes, the last member of their crew and resident xenobiologist, peered over Felix's shoulder. She okay? More or less, Felix muttered. Still needs real food, though. Karenni's voice was quiet, but steady. Where are we going? Taz grinned, spinning his chair. To meet some very sketchy people, kiddo. Hope you like breaking rules. Gus shot him a look. We're heading to the Wayfarer's Rest, a deep space refueling station. No questions asked, no records kept. Mira frowned. That place is crawling with corporate mercs and smugglers. It's the last place we should be taking a Zelathai exile. It's also the first place no one will think to look for one, Gus countered. And if we want to figure out why she's in trouble, we need to get off the grid. Mira sighed, running a hand through her curly red hair. Just saying, if this goes bad, it's going really bad. Felix adjusted his glasses. I'd argue it's already bad. Karenni tilted her head. Is this normal for humans? Taz snorted. Kid, normal for humans is making terrible decisions and hoping for the best. Gus set his jaw as the NAV system beeped. They were approaching Wayfarer's Rest. This was the part where things got tricky. Wayfarer's Rest was a metal behemoth floating in the void, an ancient station built from patchwork alloys, barely holding itself together under layers of unauthorized modifications. Neon lights flickered against the hull, advertising everything from unregulated weaponry to questionable entertainment services. Gus eased the skiff into a docking bay, exhaling slowly. All right, keep your heads down, act like you belong, and don't start any fights. Taz smirked. Define start. Mira rolled her eyes and handed Karenni a hooded cloak. This should help you blend in. Karenni pulled it over her head, her tendrils shifting slightly beneath the fabric. I do not blend well. Yeah, well, Gus muttered, adjusting his coat. None of us do. The station smelled of recycled air, oil, and desperation. As they moved through the main promenade, Gus kept Karenni close, scanning the crowd for their contact. A few mercenaries gave them wary glances, but most were too focused on their own deals to care. Tez led them into a dimly lit back room of a bar called a Hollow Coil, where a bald, four-armed alien named Vec waited at a booth, cleaning his claws with a vibra knife. Well, Vec rumbled, his deep voice vibrating the table. If it isn't Gus Tillman back from the dead. Not yet, Gus replied. Got work for you. Vec's four black eyes flicked toward Kareni. Ah, I see. He leaned forward. You do realize there's a bounty on stray Zelithai, yes? Kareni tensed. Gus held up a hand. We're not selling. We need information. Vec drummed his fingers on the table. That'll cost you. Gus slid a small data chip across the table. Blueprints for a decommissioned Terran stealth fighter. High value. Vec raised a brow, then inserted the chip into his wrist scanner. A slow grin spread across his face. You always bring me the best gifts, Tillman. Gus grunted. So? What do you know? Vec tapped the table, considering. The Zelithai don't exile their own, not unless they think they have a reason. His gaze drifted back to Kareni. Tell me, little one, why would your people abandon you? Kareni hesitated, then whispered, I see things. I know when it will break. Vec stilled. Gus frowned. What? Vec let out a low chuckle, but there was no humor in it. Oh, you poor fools. He leaned forward. You're carrying something far more dangerous than a lost child. Kareni swallowed hard. What do you mean? Vec's voice dropped to a near whisper. The Zelithai, they rely on perfect precision. Their technology, their society, everything runs on rigid, calculated efficiency. No randomness. No anomalies. He gestured at Kareni. You're chaos to them. Felix's eyes widened. They feared her because she could see failure coming before it happened? Vec nodded. More than that. If she's here, then something big is coming. Something her people don't want to acknowledge. He leaned back. And that means you're in trouble. As if on cue, Gus's wrist comm lit up. A security alert flashed across the screen. Tez swore under his breath. Corporate mercs just entered the station, searching for unregistered passengers matching non-human profiles. Gus's jaw clenched. Damn it. Vec sighed. Looks like your luck ran out. He glanced at Kareni. Better run. Little chaos bringer. Kareni gripped Gus's sleeve. What do we do? Gus exhaled sharply. We get off this rock. Now! They wove through the station's winding corridors, dodging patrols as warning sirens began to blare. Taz hacked into a terminal, rerouting a maintenance shuttle to a private docking bay. We got 5 minutes before they locked down the port. Mira guided Kareni forward. Just a little further. They rounded a corner and ran straight into 3 armored mercenaries. Weapons raised. Orders shouted. Gus moved first. He yanked a rusted emergency pipe from the wall and slammed it into the nearest merc's helmet, knocking him sideways. Mira ducked as Felix hurled a stun grenade, the explosion disorienting their attackers. Tez fired up a stolen plasma torch, grinning. You want to dance? Kareni suddenly stiffened, eyes darting to the ceiling. The support beam, she whispered. It's going to collapse. Gus didn't question her. He grabbed Taz and shoved him forward just as the beam above buckled, crushing 2 of the mercs beneath it. Felix gaped. That was... Later, Gus snapped. Move! They sprinted for the shuttle, diving into the cockpit, just as station security locked down the airlocks. Gus punched the thrusters. The ship lurched forward, escaping in a blaze of stolen fire. As wayfarers shrank behind them, Kareni turned to Gus, voice quiet but firm. I don't want to run anymore. Gus exhaled. Then we need to find out what's coming. Felix adjusted his glasses. And fast. Because if the Zelithai were willing to throw her away, whatever's coming is bad enough that even they're afraid of it. The stars stretch before them. No turning back now. End of section 2. The stolen shuttle streaked through the void, its patchwork engines groaning in protest. Gus tightened his grip on the controls, eyes flicking between the flickering readouts and the silent figure seated beside him. Kareni sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at nothing. Her golden eyes were unfocused, lost in thought or something deeper. Behind them, the rest of the crew huddled around a hollow display, Sorting through stolen Zelithide data, Felix had managed to decrypt before their escape. The dim blue light reflected off Myra's furrowed brow as she scrolled through page after page of unreadable alien script. "This is bad," Felix muttered. "Really bad." Taz, slouched against the bulkhead, let out a low whistle. "Define bad, Doc." "Oops. We made the Zelithide mad bad or galaxy-wide catastrophe bad." Felix exhaled. "Both." Gus didn't take his eyes off the controls. "Explain." Felix tapped the blinking section of the display. Karenni wasn't just abandoned. She was erased. There's no birth record, no genetic logs, nothing. The Zelithide didn't exile her. They tried to pretend she never existed. Myra's expression darkened. "Why?" Karenni finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Because I see things. Patterns. Failures before they happen." She hesitated. "And I saw something they refused to believe." A heavy silence filled the cabin. Gus's gut tightened. "What did you see, kid?" Karenni's hands clenched in her lap. "A collapse." She looked up, gaze distant. "Not just a battle, not just a war. Everything failing, all at once. The ships, the cities, the Zelithai Empire itself." Mira stiffened. "You're saying their whole society is on the verge of collapse?" Karenni nodded. "They run everything by perfect, calculated precision. No room for error, no tolerance for deviation. But nothing is truly perfect." Her eyes glowed softly. "Something is coming. Something they won't be able to control." Felix paled. "And instead of listening to you, they threw you away?" Karenni lowered her gaze. "I am an anomaly, a flaw." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And they do not tolerate flaws." Gus ran a hand over his face. Damn it. He should have walked away on Omicron 7, should have left her there. But now they were tangled in something bigger than a lost kid, bigger than all of them. A warning siren blared through the cockpit. Taz said, eyes wide as he leaned toward the NAV screen. "Hate to interrupt the existential crisis, but we got a problem." Gus cursed. A big problem. A Zelithai warship, right on their tail. The Vishon, a Zelithai Hunter-class cruiser, loomed behind them like a predator closing in on wounded prey. Sleek, obsidian black, lined with pulsing silver veins of energy, designed for both speed and precision kills. "We are so dead," Taz muttered. Gus didn't argue. Outrunning a warship wasn't an option. Myra's hands flew across the comm controls. "They're hailing us." Gus gritted his teeth. Put them through. A shimmering figure materialized on the hollow display. A Zelithai woman, clad in high command regalia. Her expression was unreadable, her golden eyes cold. "I am Commander Zalziri of the Vishon," she announced. "You are harboring a fugitive of the Zelithai Dominion. Surrender the girl, and we will allow you to live." Karenni shrank back. Gus leaned forward. "Yeah, see, I got a problem with that. You don't just dump a kid on a backwater planet, and then show up demanding her back." Zalziri's gaze flickered to Karenni. "She is not a child. She is a danger." Felix scoffed. "Because she can see your empire falling apart?" Zalziri's expression remained impassive. "Because she is the cause." Karenni flinched. "That's not true." Zalziri tilted her head. "Is it not? Since the moment of your birth, you have predicted failure, weakness, decay. You are a sickness spreading through our perfection. You are entropy given form." Karenni's breathing quickened. Gus's grip tightened on the throttle. He could see it now, the way they had twisted this. They weren't afraid of Karenni because she was wrong. They were afraid because she was right. "You're scared," Gus said, voice low. Zalziri's expression flickered. "We do not fear." "Yeah? Then why are you chasing down a kid in a stolen shuttle, instead of fixing the cracks in your empire?" Silence. For the first time, Zalziri hesitated. That was all Gus needed. He cut the comm line and slammed the thrusters. The shuttle pitched into a steep dive, plunging toward the gravity well of a nearby gas giant. Taz yelped. "Oh, we're dying today, aren't we?" "Not if you shut up and reroute power to the rear shields." Gus snapped. Felix was already moving. You're going to use the planet's gravity to slingshot us? Closest thing to a miracle we've got, Gus muttered. Mira grabbed Kareni's hand. Hold on. The warship fired. Blue energy lanced toward them. But Gus twisted the shuttle at the last second, letting the gravity well pull them into a breakneck spiral. The warship followed. Alarms blared. Hull integrity dropping. Gus's arms ached as he fought the controls. Then, Kareni's voice cut through the chaos. There's a fault in their starboard stabilizer. Gus didn't question it. He hit the manual override, rolling the ship just as the Vishon stabilizer gave out. The warship lurched violently, spiraling off course. Gus seized the opportunity, gunning the engines one last time, and they broke free, slingshotting out of gravity, well, like a bullet. The warship spun, unable to follow. Silence filled the cabin. Mira let out a shaky breath. We're alive? Felix collapsed against his seat. Somehow. Taz whooped. Kareni, you are officially my favorite little space gremlin. Kareni, still trembling, managed a small, uncertain smile. Gus exhaled. They'd bought themselves time. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He turned to Kareni. You said the collapse is coming. How soon? Kareni's expression darkened. It's already started. Gus nodded. Then it's time to stop running. Felix frowned. What does that mean? Gus set his jaw. It means we find out what's really happening to the Zelathai, and we make damn sure we're on the right side of it. The stars stretch before them. No more hiding. No more running. Time to fight. The stolen shuttle coasted toward the derelict Zelathai outpost, its rusted spires barely clinging to the surface of a forgotten moon. Gus tightened his grip on the controls. Last chance to turn back. Kareni's golden eyes glowed in the dim light. No turning back. Mira adjusted her rebreather. Then let's get this over with. The outpost had once been a Zelathai research station, long abandoned, now little more than crumbling metal and shattered glass. But according to Felix's stolen data, this was where the first cracks in the Zelathai Empire had been discovered. And no one had wanted to admit it. They stepped onto the dusty surface, their boots crunching against centuries of neglect. The station's entrance flickered with half-dead security lights, the automated greeting barely more than static. Taz whistled. Well, this place is haunted. Less jokes, Gus muttered. More finding answers. Inside, the air was thin and stale, but the system still hummed with faint power. Felix hacked into a terminal, fingers flying across alien keys. A distorted voice crackled through the speakers. Project Terminus. Unauthorized access detected. Warning. Then the logs opened. Mira scanned the data, her face going pale. Oh no. What? Gus demanded. Felix exhaled. The Zelathai knew. He gestured at the screen. This place wasn't abandoned. It was buried. Kareni stepped forward, reading the scrolling text in her native language. They discovered a flaw in their own technology, she whispered. A miscalculation. Something they couldn't correct. Mira shook her head. That doesn't make sense. The Zelathai don't make mistakes. That's the problem, Kareni said softly. They did, and instead of fixing it, they pretended it didn't exist. Gus's gut twisted. What kind of mistake are we talking about? Felix's eyes darkened. Everything. The truth was devastating. The Zelathai had built their entire civilization on predictability, from the precise alignment of their structures to the unerring calculations of their hyperdrives. They had engineered a world where nothing unexpected could occur. But beneath the perfection, entropy had grown. Their infrastructure was failing. Their technology had reached a point where it could no longer sustain itself. Kareni turned to them, realization dawning in her expression. They didn't exile me because I was wrong. She swallowed hard. They exiled me because I was the first to see the inevitable. The collapse was already happening. Power grids flickering, ships miscalculating jumps, entire cities on the verge of silent failure. The Zelathai had ignored it for centuries, convinced of their own infallibility. Now, they were running out of time. Mira gripped the console. They knew. They always knew. Felix nodded. And instead of adapting, they doubled down on perfection. Gus clenched his fists. So what do we do about it? Karini hesitated. We tell them the truth. Tez raised a brow. Oh, yeah, because that went so well last time. She looked up at him. We don't just tell them. We show them. Gus met her gaze. How? Kareni's voice was steady. We take their most perfect creation, one of their own warships, and make it fail. Silence. Then Taz grinned. Oh, I like this plan. Felix adjusted his glasses. It's insane. Mira exhaled. It's the only way. The Vishan was still hunting them. Gus piloted the shuttle into open space, broadcasting a distress signal on every known Zelithai channel. Tez cracked his knuckles. They're going to be mad. Good, Gus said. It took less than an hour. The warship appeared in a shimmer of light, its sleek black form blotting out the stars. Commander Zalziri's face flickered onto the comms. You are either brave or incredibly foolish. Gus smirked. Little of both. Zalziri's gaze flickered to Kareni. Surrender now. Kareni stepped forward. You should listen to me. Zalziri's expression didn't change. We do not listen to entropy. Kareni's eyes glowed softly. Then watch. Felix activated the hijack transmission, a direct uplink to the Vishan's internal diagnostics. The warship's crew froze. Every hidden flaw, every unnoticed failure, exposed in real time. Power fluctuations, minor calculation errors, microfractures forming in the hull. Nothing catastrophic. Yet, but it was proof. The Vishan wasn't perfect. None of their ships were. Their entire empire was fraying at the seams. For the first time, Gus saw something unfamiliar in Zalziri's expression. Doubt. Kareni's voice was quiet, but firm. Your people are not dying because of me. You are dying because you refuse to change. Zalziri didn't respond. But behind her, the Zelithai crew hesitated, looking at their own screens, their own unraveling certainty. And that was all Kareni needed. The crew of the stolen shuttle watched as the Vishan slowly turned away, disappearing into the void. They had expected a fight. Instead, they had planted a seed. Felix let out a slow breath. Do you think they'll listen? Kareni closed her eyes. Not all of them. She opened them again, gaze steady. But some will. Gus exhaled. Then we just made the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy. Taz grinned. Yeah, but we also made allies. Mira stretched. So what now? Kareni stepped forward, looking out into the endless stars. Now, she said, we find the others who can see. A slow smile spread across Gus's face. Hell of a plan, kid. The stars stretched before them, uncertain, untamed, full of possibility. And for the first time, Kareni wasn't running anymore. She was leading.